All right, thank you very much, Abdulsalam Jibril, for that backgrounder. We have guests with us, two of them, of course, regulars on Good Morning Nigeria. Let's welcome Dr. Emeka Okengu, a development economist, who is right here with us in the studios. Dr. Okengu, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Good morning, Nigeria.
And joining us from our Kaduna Network Center, another familiar face, Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited, of course, former banker, MNI, and lots more. Shuaibu Idris. Shuaibu Idris, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigerians, and thank you very much for having me once again.
It's a pleasure to have you as always. And from our Lagos studio, we are being joined by Ambassador Ayola Olunkani. He is a career diplomat involved in economic diplomacy and was former Nigerian High Commissioner to New Zealand, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea. He's also a former Director General of Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture, NASIMA. Ambassador Olukani, thanks so much for joining us.
Very much for the invitation, and good morning, Nigerians. Kingsley, my dear brother, good morning to you as well.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador Olukani. Let's begin with Shuaibu Idris in our Kaduna Network Center. Well, this had been a long-standing demand by analysts, by persons in the productive sector, in the real sector of the economy, and all around. But it seemed such a tough deal to say, look, let's merge or eliminate multiple exchange rate windows that had become, many would say, a conduit for undermining the economy. So what we have seen now, Shuaibu Idris, is it a healthy development? And if so, in your opinion, why?
Kingsley, I wish I would be allowed to take a dance step at this discussion, because if you do remember, at least we have had not less than 5 discussions on this subject matter, and my position has been consistently that there is no point having multiple exchange rate. This country, from the time of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida's presidency till that of the second coming of President Obasanjo, down to even Goodluck Jonathan, we've had a mechanism where we did discuss and manage our exchange rates. On number one, we are doing fixed exchange rate. We went to floating exchange rate. We went to manage floating exchange rate. We went to quite a number of other mechanisms that we have tried, and we finally came to a conclusion to have a managed floating exchange rate. President Muhammadu Buhari inherited a system that we were using to value our exchange rate, or the Naira in particular, a mechanism that we use the market forces. And yes, market forces may not be the very best, but there is no better alternative in allocation of scarce resources than market forces of demand and supply, subject to a slight regulation that we almost always require. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to God be the glory, on the first day of his assumption of office, gave a directives, and we love to see that implemented. And to God be the glory, within the first 1-2 weeks, we have now abolished the rent-seeking mechanism of allocation of scarce foreign exchange. Mark you, there is absolutely nothing wrong in supporting your currency if you have the capacity and the wherewithal to support the currency. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other countries of the world that support their currencies, they have $1 trillion in their reserves. We have a country that is generally import dependent. We don't have a robust manufacturing background or economy, and yet we want to support ostentatious consumption by subsidizing our import. Why should we subsidize import? If anybody wishes to buy imported items, let the price be determined by the market forces, as opposed to a situation where 1, 2, or 5 people in the central bank will sit down to allocate dollars to a few cronies of theirs, friends of theirs. Kingsley, Jumai and fellow discussant, we have had a period when central bank can give you allocation of $1 million, and if you are lucky, you sell the same $1 million at a premium of 100 naira, thereby making you a billionaire within a period of 1-2 days. We are a country of 220 million people. When you just single out 5, 10, 20, or even 1,000, or even 1 million of us to be allocated dollars, is that the best way to share our natural resources? The worst situation that has happened in this country in the last 5 to 7 years, believe you me sincerely, local governments have been strangulated of cash, state government have been strangulated of cash, even the federal government at the center has been strangulated of cash. Why has that been? Because our commonwealth is not being priced appropriately. Quite a number of state governments are not able to pay even salaries, talk less of pension and gratuities of their retired staff. And why was that? Because the naira was significantly undervalued, and we just kept doing business as if it is business as usual, when in essence we should have taken a position that could attract foreign direct investment, that could attract portfolio investment in our country, that could help rejuvenate the economy, that could help make sure that our export become competitive. But we have had a mechanism and people at the central bank, and indeed the presidency, that were supporting this kind of, if you like, with all sense of modesty, a level of rascality in terms of management of the foreign exchange. I believe, and I thank God Almighty that has made it possible for me to witness today that we have had a president that said enough of this rent-seeking mechanism of allocation of our scarce resources. Let me pause here, Kingsley and fellow discussant.
Okay, thank you, Shuaibu Idris, for your opening comments there. Let's bring in still from Ambassador Ayola Olukani. He's a career diplomat involved in economic diplomacy. In the 70s, we learned that the naira was even higher than the dollar, and along the line, nobody knows what happened. Things got so bad. Now let's go down to the basics of it all. Most Nigerians watching this program would like to understand what it means to talk about a unified exchange rate and how it would affect them as Nigerians. Let's have your take on that.
Thank you very much, Jumai, for that. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this. First, let me say that now we've had an administration that has the courage to pick up the gauntlet. We say that each time we discuss it, we've just been kicking the can down the road. This time around, we have a courageous act. You had said that in the 70s, I started my career in the Foreign Service in 1980. Truly, when I was being posted out, 1 naira gave me $1.62. I got a car loan, $4,800. It came to about $6,600. That was it, as far as we're concerned. Now, what about the question and issues of the impact? I think we've seen an immediate reaction in terms of what has happened in the stock exchange. A lot of foreign investors are now coming in because they see down the road that indeed we have now taken the courage to be able to have a unified foreign exchange. Let me give you, because it's always very good to concretize the abstractions. As a diplomat outside, I serve as High Commissioner in Australia. And the mining sector was a very important and very interesting sector. And we started working on it. A lot of Australian investors who came on to me, to us in the mission, who were approaching, look, Nigeria is blessed with vast mineral deposits. Please come home. One of the first things they were asking, Ambassador, What are you doing with your double rates? What are you doing with your forex regime? Mining is a long-term investment. If we go in and we put in about 5 billion, what are we going to do in terms of the question of our resources, in terms of taking out? So it was one of the most difficult things I personally had to face as far as that. But long story short, some of them braced it, came in home. The Benio trough contained lead, zinc, and silver, and they put some money at the end of the day. But it was tough in terms of getting their money out. And they told me, said, look, listen, Ambassador, they said we should go to the other market, black market, to be able to take out our money. This is not it. This is not right. So the question of a unified foreign exchange will, one, in the first case, bring in stability, predictability, and then you can plan. You had asked the question, as far as the question of what happens to the ordinary Nigerians. There's no doubt about it that at the end of the day, you could have some small little increase in terms of the pricing. But if you look at what has happened in the past few days, since the president himself announced this at the inauguration, I don't think between what is going to happen as far as the main rate, the official rate, and the, of course, the black market rate, the difference will not be much. I was recently out of the country and I went on to Kigali for a meeting, an EU meeting, and I met Nigerians who have gone to the place to invest. I met one young man, because it's always good to concretize the abstraction and give good example. He said he was into coffee in Rwanda. I said, why? He said, because look, listen, the investment environment is okay. In terms of the question of foreign exchange, I don't have to go to any black market. So it is predictable. I'm investing in coffee in Rwanda to develop coffee in that particular area and export. And when I export, I get my money and I go on to expand the frontiers. So this is one of the main things. And as, of course, as former DG Nasima, we went across the country. We went to Kano, we went to Kaduna, we were in Benin, we were in Ozobulu, we were in Warri, we were everywhere. And the question people are asking is that, look, listen, when are we as an OPS, and when would they listen to us that let us unify this forex so that as SMEs, we can know that this is what we are going to get. They're not going to drive us to the private market, to the black market. So I think there's a lot of advantages in it. There could be some downside which we can manage as far as this is concerned. And let me tell this story and now I'll stop. When I was in Israel, 1994, 1998, the official rate was 22 naira to the dollar. The black market, the other window, quote unquote, was 86 naira. So what a lot of people do who are involved in operations of criminal, they get the money at the official rate. Usually people just add additional names. You can add as many as 500 names to get the money at the official rate. And then they just go on to the arbitrage. They just go arbitrage. They just, I mean, my brother there, I mean, Dauda said, you just make people millionaires. It's not even within a day. You make people millionaires within hours because of this kind of multiple exchange rate. So let us pursue it effectively, so that for us to be able to have advantage of it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ayo Olukone, there for your intervention. And the examples you gave by way of illustration, those examples are pretty interesting. But just a soft reminder, our preferred expression is a parallel exchange rate rather than the black market rate. So we refer to it as a parallel market rate. And of course you are familiar with the connotation of the use of black as an identity that represents the other side. So we say parallel market rate, and we'll come back to the studios now. Dr. Emeka Okengu. Dr. Emeka Okengu, before we again, I know that, I mean, you have a lot to say in terms of the technical issues around this. Just for someone who's been in the public space, in public affairs, can you surmise and say this is probably what was playing out in the minds of the operators at the central bank and then the operators at the political leadership level of the country? Despite the agitation, despite the hue and cry, eliminate these multiple exchange windows. It is hurting us. It is nobody seemed to listen. Was it that the rest of us didn't know what we were saying, and they were the ones who were who knew what to do, and therefore were taking us to the promised land? How do you explain this?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I think you just put it right because you identified the two elephants: the political considerations and, of course, central bank doing its job. I think the political considerations took a bigger part of that decision being reached, not to float the currency. Remembering that you're running a three-tier economy, as it were. I wouldn't know how else to describe it apart from calling it first the underground economy, and then the informal economy, and then the formal economy, which everybody seems to be focusing all our attention on. Now, for the formal economy, structured instruments are there that are called markets. For the informal economy, you also have what you call markets that are not markets, okay, because you're not able to condemn them into any stratification, okay, vis-a-vis now placing values and all that against your formal market. And of course, you now have your underground market where a lot of us live, a lot of Nigerians, a lot of things happen there, informally, most of the times not captured. So in taking this decision of floating, this is where the political, I think, interests or intrigues we want to play. You have 80 million Nigerians. You have statistics showing that millions and millions of your people are on every day entering or falling below the breadline. They are entering into poverty, to the point that right now, statistically, we have about 133 million Nigerians living in multi-dimensional poverty levels. If you're not very careful with your monetary policy and what you do with it, you could actually create a crisis. More so where a lot of these people don't have jobs, you don't have infrastructure that supports them, you don't have industries that are working, you don't have any social services that can also now support what they're doing. Now, having said so, I am also one of those protagonists that say remove these multiple exchange rates and float it, so that your dollar or your money can begin to now get value. However, there's a demand. It's not enough for you to remove, because what it is you have right now is a Goliath and a David in the ring. We don't know if this David has a sling, but we do know that Goliath has the brawn. And in this instance, I'm talking about the dollar, which is the medium of exchange, against the naira. Now, what does the dollar mean to us? This is where this argument can now begin to take some kind of, firmer foundation. The dollar means bread. The dollar means pure water.
How?
Okay. Now, the flour that you use in making your bread, where do you get it from? The leather you use in folding the bread, or in fact, the label you use in putting your bread, where do you get it from?
We import it.
Okay? Now, it means your pure water. The engine you use in making your pure water, where do you get it from?
We import.
The leather you use in folding it, where do you get it from? The car you use in transporting it, how do you fuel it? The spare parts, the tires, the fuel. So when people are talking about the dollar and dollarization, they think is at that formal market. So at the formal market, its impact in the underground market and the informal market is actually where you must begin to focus on to be able to juxtapose this right. So it's one thing for you to be able to take this decision, which is a right decision, okay? But the tougher decision is now what you need to do to be able to give our little David the sling he needs to slay Goliath. And what would this be? In a country where you have every MDA, every research institute, every institution of government doing policy. In fact, there's even a policy that says that research institutes cannot even take their research above some certain limits. The moment you get to prototype, you can't commercialize. And then there is no policy, there is no link between the market, okay? There's no way where policy is meeting business. Now, if you don't have this understanding, we also look at this studio now. Yes, looks very Nigerian, looks everything we have inside this, studio. From even, the flowers, I reckon I can tell you, even if you got somebody in Nigeria to make it, they got the input from China or from some other place. So when we're talking about dollar and floating it, now, if you float it for too long and you also do not have what can be able to now kickstart your own local production, considering that when you say that money is a medium of exchange, okay, it simply means if you put a definition to exchange, what are you exchanging your money for? This is where your value comes. And at the time we seemed to be on top of it. I mean, some of us were in school then. We could fly into London with a student rebate, I think at about I don't know, 2000, because I remember at one time as a student in UNN, I used to drive a car. I bought a Beetle, and it was steel leather Beetle for 2,000 naira. A 504 then was 7,000 naira. But you had Pan producing, you had Volkswagen producing, okay? And the time we were having this, our naira this strong, you had a lot of research institutes that were supporting our plantations that were producing cocoa. We were producing cocoa in the millions from where Kingston comes from. Each time we talk about this, we talk about NIFO. If you wanted to impress anybody, go to NIFO with a camera. Anybody will think you are in New York. He's sitting down here. Okay? Now, NIFO was supporting a lot of a palm production that was going on to the point that at one time, we became either the first or second, largest producers of some of these commodities. So if you're talking about floating your currency, good idea. Okay, but please remember that the devil in the room is the word demand. Now, the moment your market begins to now demand, it is now the value that your currency brings to the table that gives it its position in that politics of international economic relations. So kudos to the fact that this policy has been taken, but I think this is where the work will really begin as a country for me.
Indeed. You raised a lot of pertinent questions. Let's get the views of Shaibu Idris. They said that implementing this policy will not be a walk in the park because it will require a lot of careful planning. And some experts also said that the cabals out there might fight against the policy itself.
Thank you very much, Juma. I must commend Dr. Okongu for linking, the exchange rate to the level, the lowest level of our economy. But I'd like to draw his attention to the fact that in the last 7 or so years, did a pure water producer or maker ever had access to the 400 naira to $1 supply? The answer is no. Did he, even when he or she was bringing in the machinery to make pure water, was he able to get dollar at the official exchange rate? The answer is no. Maybe the likes of the major flour millers, I don't want to mention names, may have had access to the 420 or 430 naira to $1 when they were importing wheat. But other than that, you will agree with me that the larger proportion of business players in Nigeria never ever had access to this 420 or 430 naira to $1. Granted, it is a WIP, what we call in accounting work in progress. The giant step has been taken. We have now unified the exchange rate. I am sure my former boss in the banking industry, who is now the advisor to Mr. President, Mr. Wale Edun, advisor on monetary policy, he used to be in the World Bank, and he knows a lot about what is needed to be done post the step that the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu has taken, that is unifying the exchange rate. We need to make sure that we have a managed floating exchange rate. We can't allow the naira to float just at whatever vagaries of demand and supply, particularly when we have a monster in the room that we are not able to contain. Let's dimension the various angles of demand for the dollar. Who are those who demand for this currency? Number one, let's say the manufacturers. They import raw materials. Call them the traders. They import finished good television and other accessories that we import for our betterment. That is the second demand angle. Then maybe for invisible items, those of us traveling for business travel allowance or education or health or other demands. But the biggest monster in terms of the demand for the dollar is that angle of the economy that Dr. Okongu said, the underground economy. What is that underground economy? Call it, in the name it deserves to be called, corruption. Now, politicians, civil servants steal our money, and the best way to hide this money is to demand for dollar. Now, the next best step that Bola Ahmed Tinubu needs to take is to see how best his government can tame the monster in the room, that is corruption, so that the angle of demand for dollar from the corrupt Nigerians could be tamed, because this angle of demand is the angle that is able to buy dollar at almost any rate. If we isolate, segment, and tame that, believe you me sincerely, we will have an economy that will be vibrant. Let me take a cursory look at the export industry. Now that we have unified the exchange rate, solid minerals production will most likely increase. I happen to be on the board of a company that just 2 days ago, I was told the company has been able to produce lithium, almost 6,000 metric tons of lithium, despite the insecurity. Imagine how much money, how much dollars will that lithium begin to generate and to expand in the economy. We've had a situation where Nigerians are even turned back, even not being able to buy tickets. Airlines, what is their name? Dubai Airline, Emirates has stopped coming to Nigeria because they are not able to repatriate their money. We are now a pariah nation as far as IATA is concerned, because airline companies are not able to repatriate their money. How else do we need to ruin this economy? I have said it on this platform and in this one of these discussions that we have had, that Emefiele and his guys took our financial system 50 years back for some of these policies that they have done, from the anchor borrower scheme that was, managed to be given to choosing few, to the other interventions that they did. These were some of the things that inflated our economy, and we pumped so much naira, and we wanted the naira value to be stable. How is that possible? I've always likened it to when you take a balloon and you blow so much air into the balloon, what will eventually happen to the balloon? It will burst. So this is what had happened. And I believe, Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the team he is beginning to assemble, I pray that he is able to form a government of national competence, not government of national unity, so that we can have competent Nigerians run our system, run our health sector, run our agri, run our economy, run our education, not nepotistic kind of arrangement where just anything goes.
All right, Shuaibu Idris, thank you very much for, again, your intervention in this conversation. Let's go over to our Lagos Network Center and bring in Ambassador Ayo Olukone into the conversation one more time. Ambassador Olukone, while we are unpacking the technical and related aspects of the strive to eliminate multiple exchange rate windows, tell us something. I mean, you were DG of Nasima, and then you've also talked about your experience with miners. The organized private sector used to be a respected voice in this economy. The NESG, also, of course, a respected voice. They hold their summits annually. And proposals were made to say, look, these are the concerns that we have, and these are our suggested ways. We know that many years past, their voices were respected, and their interventions often turned out to be policy instruments that the government then went ahead with. Now, if we are saying that the hardest part of the job comes after the elimination of the multiple exchange rate windows, what are those things that we should watch out for in terms of the policy environment, in terms of the players in the policy environment? Because there are all kinds of competing interests. How do we deal, for instance, with those who want a retention of the rent system, and then those who also want the system to continue to fester on account of the underground economy that Dr. Okengu and Shuaibu Idris very expertly articulated?
Kingsley, let me say I take note of the point you made in terms of the question of, yes, we are talking about the parallel market and the issues of what's going on. I'm very fond of the saying of the Mario Cuomo, the famous governor and mayor of New York. He says that you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. You campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. And this is applicable in this case. And I think that is what my dear brother, Mr. Shuaibu, and also the prof, the development economist with you, has made reference to in terms of the question. Now that this policy is now being acted upon, is now being implemented, we need an effective management in terms of how to deal with it, how to deal with the question and issues of what you refer to in terms of those, in terms of the corruption which is going to be involved, the transparency with which it is going to be effectively implemented. Of course, you made reference to the question of the organized private sector. The organized private sector, when I was in there, it was one of the issues which we got contending with. Of course, you know, the organized private sector consists of, you have your NASIMA, you have your NASME, you have your NASI, you have NECA, you have MAN. These policies are putting out there. It was very frustrating in terms of getting those people who are managing the economy at that particular period to effectively do what is right. It was always a big period, a big problem. We had meetings regularly. Of course, we used to have meetings with the PBEC, and there was also the quarterly media briefing with the organized private sector, which provided an opportunity for the organized private sector to put out its own issues there. They would be able to relate about the question and problems which they had. Suddenly, the quarterly briefing ended. And I think perhaps this is one of the areas which we want to suggest, that the quarterly presidential media briefing, not necessarily with the president himself, but those who will manage the economy, I think is one of the key areas which we want to suggest that the administration of President Bola Tinubu should look at. So you have a close encounter with the organized private sector in terms of the practical issues. What are the problems? What is happening in terms of managing? Because there will still be the question of managing this new system which we have put in place and what we're expected to do, so that it can be maintained and not, of course, we would have a throwback. Let me give you a good example of what happened recently in terms of, I'm wearing an Nigeria. The Ogun State government, of course, had launched the authentic Adire Ogun, which will take care of the question of authenticity, the whole question of right, and then so that the people who are producing them will. It was launched, and then, like, I think I can't remember who made mention. I think it was our guests with you in the studio. What is the component of this? How much of this is imported? How much of this is dependent on forex? And the question which we said, okay, fine, the authentic Adire Ogun has been launched. Sustainability and the question of reducing the forex exchange component is important. Long story short, immediately when I finished that place, I went to Kuto, where the women sell this kind of dresses, and I discovered that the cost of the authentic Ogun, of course, was more expensive than the one which was coming from China. And so I asked the women, what happened? They said, Oga, please, you know, this one is cheaper. This one is because, for obvious reason, they bring it from outside, And then, of course, the one they are talking to is too expensive. We ask government to support us, to help us, to be able to reduce the cost. They won't say, yeah, you know, we have to feed our children. So they are selling the one that is coming in. These are the practical issues which will be dealt with, which will resolve. So that's why I was saying that I think as part of the strategic options, to maintain this thing, to ensure success as far as this is concerned, of course, I think there's going to be need for a forum between the organized private sector and government and those who are in charge of the economy. That is that. I made mention, of course, the question on the issues of mining, you know, at the end of the day too as well. I'm currently involved, we're currently involved in some of those people who are interested in the Nigerian mining sector. Mention the question of lithium. What is going to happen? In Ibadan, there's the International Gemstone Market in Ibadan, Ojo area. Tourmaline and Heart areas are keystone, key valued minerals. You will be shocked that, one, the market itself is in a slum area of Ibadan. Secondly, it is dominated by foreigners. So what we think will happen is that at the end of the day, this new system will help in terms of inviting foreign exchange, foreigners, foreign investors, so that there can be the formal section of our solid mineral sector will also receive inflow, and then of course there will be no problem in terms of. But long story short, I think we still need for the organized private sector, which you talked about, engagement closely with government in terms of money, so that they'll be able to take up the question on the crisis and problem which may come up. Because don't let us deceive ourselves. There will be problem. People will fight back, but the way, of course, we deal with it is what will make success of this particular endeavor.
Okay, Ambassador Ayola, thank you so much for your comments there, and you've also raised issues, about the manufacturing industry and how it can grow. The unified exchange rate would also mean that manufacturers who normally source this bulk of forex from the black market at astronomical rates will be able to access it at lower rates to import raw materials. I'm talking about the African Free Trade Agreement out there. How will it affect it?
Well, first you have the challenges of what they call their convergence criteria, really, after. I don't even think we've gotten to that point yet. And somehow, in the midst of all that, the French bloc pulled out and then launched their own euro or whatever currency that they launched against that common currency that Africa wanted to adopt. But again, if we launched after today, 80% of the products will be taken to the market, will be products made from China. Because you have more Chinatowns, producing in Africa than you have industries in Africa. In fact, the Chinatowns in the SADC region, would comfortably cover all the whole, industries in the rest of Africa. That's one. Two, remember that at one time there was an audit, and it showed that 80% of our industries, were gaping for air because they needed spares. So in trying to, yes, I think what had happened with our forex system was a good product that was mismanaged. Okay, and then the wrong people started probably, I'm not in the central bank, I'm not speaking for them, now started taking advantage of it, like Trump was wont to say. He set up a system and I took advantage of the system. Now, there is no way you will not support your local industry without your research institute supporting them. Because what had happened is that if you go and look at the funding we give to our research institutions, they form less than 0.1% of national budget. So a lot of these institutions are no longer functioning. I'm happy that Ambassador mentioned mining. Maybe I should say this. I was national strategic consultant, to the World Bank on a mining project they call the EFO. And I've been involved in mining. I have a mining company that's over 80 years old that was established by my forebears. So I am comfortable with mining. And we had gotten in some Australians to come in here. We had gone then as far as, Taraba State. And what we found is probably what I shouldn't be saying on national television. The findings were awesome. Now, but how this works is that if you understand how the mining system works, the first thing you need to do is to be able to generate what they call borehole data. And against that borehole data, you can now begin to now seek for what they call institute values, okay, as a means of raising your funding. And these funds can be raised easily in markets. Now, we are back to markets again. Now, the former structure of Nigeria, unfortunately, our former market structure that can actually play in this getting the market to determine, values is in comatose. That's the truth. If you see any industry in Nigeria that is producing, if you are not depending on foreigners or foreign exchange or foreign sources for their inputs, it will be at least 85%. Every and any. From your textiles to your plastics to your furniture to your fabric, to everything you can think about. Now, how are you going to be floating without supporting? So I think what we need to very quickly do, yes, my big brother in Kaduna, Prof, is very correct. The pure water people don't have access to this forex because at that level, the central bank didn't drill down, okay, to getting some microfinance banks to also have access to some of these funds. These were some of the policy mistakes that they made. And why didn't they do so? Because a lot of the things that they were doing was hinged on the banking sector. A lot of the monies that the central bank never gave anybody money directly. What they did was they transferred, those risks to banks. And me and you know that even you as Jumai or Oga Kingsley, to go to the bank now to go and get a loan, they will not be looking at your pedigree as a seasoned broadcasters, which should have, been the criteria in any other climb. Oh, this is Kingsley Salado, this is Jumai. Oh no, you guys want to start a television studio? Your pedigree says it, or take the money. They'll be asking Kingsley to bring a land. They'll be asking your husband to sign, your brother to countersign, bring a house there, bring this there, bring the other one there. So the people who now learn to now negate this system, we take the money, buy very expensive houses, and then use these houses basically to be able to take more money. So first, you don't even qualify, no matter how good your ideas are. So point I'm trying to make is that I think that this present administration has taken one of the most important decisions. However, that is a decision. Now, in walking the talk, I think that the next thing they should be calling now is that technical audit of our support institutions. And this is where our MDAs must come to play a part. Okay? Now, how many research institutes do we have supporting the automobile sector? How many do we have supporting the agricultural sector? We have a seeds multiplication company in this country. You want to take a camera and go there? They were there and were reporting seeds from either Ivory Coast or Togo. And then by the time those seeds came here, nobody remembered to do a soil test. So there was a mismatch. And ditto for so many other, sectors of the economy, that are now gaps in. I'll rest on this. Yesterday, my last son, insisted, he wanted to take me to Father's Day. He wanted me to see him, ride a horse. And then he takes me across an estate, just where we live. And there was this stable run by this young man. I was so impressed. Had Argentina horses, had all manners of horses. And by the time these people, finished riding, I got into a conversation with him. And I said, how are you getting the feed, to feed these animals? And he shocked me by saying that he had a forage farm, which is also always been what I have preached. To say, if you're going to be running your stable, because he now has his own forage production, he's able to keep those horses healthy. Maybe after the studios, I could just give you, so you guys can go and take a look there. Now, imagine where we were expanding, and the president had mentioned animal husbandry, okay, to be done right. If you're going to be doing animal husbandry right, the first right step is that you must produce fodder. And in producing fodder, there are two things you need. First, the right kind of seedlings for fodder, and the land that is well cultured to be able to, produce those things. So I think, not to waste a lot of time, my argument remains that this is a good policy, but there are two things that I see missing, or that might be missing. We must be able to have the program and action, okay, that also speaks clearly to how it's able to support the organized private sector that is technically, if you don't mind my saying so, moribund as it were now, to be able to now get up and move forward.
Dr. Emeka Okengu, thank you very much again for the points that you have raised. Very valuable points. And I'm sure that Nigerians will remember just some years ago, our ears were learning that Nigeria was planning to start importing cattle fodder from Brazil or somewhere.
Yeah.
Brazil, that's grass, grass from Brazil. And happily, on Good Morning Nigeria, we had an interaction with some very vibrant young guys, I think somewhere around a year or so. He joined us on that day, on that occasion, and he was telling us that, look, they produce their own fodder, and the technology they use is hydroponics. For their own fodder, you can produce, the rain is falling now, it will fall, it will cause damage, it will wash things out, and you go grow your grass and give it to your animals to feed. Dr. Okengu, thanks a lot for the points that you've raised. Now, Shuaibu Idris and Ambassador Olukoni and Dr. Okengu, let's look at it this way. President Tinubu says that he is determined to fix the economy. He has brought out his toolbox. And you know, in a toolbox, you have all kinds of gadgets. In it, you have all kinds of instruments. You have a hammer, you have a chisel, you have a spanner, maybe 8 and 10 and 10 and 11 size of spanner, that you have a wrench. Now, let's assume that he's taking out just one tool now, probably a hammer, and says, Forex market, all multiple rates, bam, closed. Many experts will also argue that, and as you gentlemen have equally pointed out in various ways, there are other very critical elements to look at in this economy. Even monetary policy is only just one aspect that we are tracking now. The fiscal policy perspective, the trade policy perspective. Listening to Ambassador Olukoni, they were telling you already the hazards of dumping on our economy. How do we start the conversation and ensure that these elements, fiscal policy and other the substrata of monetary policy, as well as trade policies, are accommodated in this whole drive to revitalize our economy? Shuaibu Idris.
On a lighter note, Oga Kingsley, as Dr. Okongu has called you, I think we are getting into the realm of maybe, I don't know, my English is failing me now. Bola Ahmed Tinubu has just started his government. There are just few appointments. We are yet to see who will be the finance minister, who is likely going to be the trade and industry minister, who eventually will emerge as the governor of Central Bank. And possibly, because economy appears to be in the heart and so dear to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, unlike President Buhari, he may also eventually appoint a chief economic advisor. These 3 or 4 key appointments, if they are made, then and only then we will be able to do justice to your question, Kingsley. I did say that we all look forward to Bola Ahmed Tinubu giving us a government of national competence, not politicians, not just anybody. Ambassador, my dear brother, Ambassador Ayola did quote a renowned politician in the U.S. that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. Obviously, top decisions have to be made, top actions have to be taken. We need to sustain the fight. And I believe the last 2-3 weeks of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu government has shown that this gentleman, despite his age, despite his possible other challenges, he is ready, willing and able to take tough decisions. He's removed, the much talked about subsidy on petroleum products that we have been so wrapped in this country. He has taken a decision to unify the exchange rate. other decisions that, the previous government was, a bit lackadaisical about taking. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, even without necessarily getting hold of levers of power, what we call levers of power, Bola Ahmed Tinubu is so bullish, is able to do this. I do hope that he will, because he did allude to this fact earlier on when he was declared winner of the election, that he's not going to form just any kind of government, but he will be forming a government of national competence. I'm still hammering on this. Let's get the best materials. Nigeria has been so blessed. Is it natural resources God has given us? Is it population God has given us? Is it talent God has given us? Almost in abundance, that we can even help other countries to run their system, but we are not using the best. Almost of the time we use our fifth 11, not even the second 11. So I do pray that as long as Bola Ahmed Tinubu keep to the promise of giving us national competence, we will have this mechanism. Now, by way of suggestion, I think it will be good and only fair for Mr. President, when eventually he forms his government, that we will have an M&E, a monitoring and evaluation unit under his office. This unit should be able to be taking an assessment of every policy prognosis and implementation, so that we will have an opportunity to review what did we set out to achieve, what are we achieving, where are the challenges, what we call variance analysis, what was our objectives, and what are we achieving, and why are we not achieving what we set out to achieve, or how best are we achieving those that we have been able to achieve. This will be very good for Mr. President's administration, if it will ever be able to succeed. I think it is also fair to mention here that Mr. President will be doing justice to us if he is able to handpick a few miscreants that have been so unreasonable with the powers and authorities vested in them, so that we could have an example which will serve as a deterrent to others. There are quite a number of people that have enjoyed quite a number of policy that was implemented by the previous government. Some of them did not utilize those resources that was given to them for the purposes for which they were given. Some of them are untouchable. We do know that they may not be able to be punished, but Mr. President can have a political solution by having a private discussion with them. Oh, you collected 2 billion naira, you collected 5 billion naira under this mechanism or that mechanism. You didn't do what you are expected. I do not want to arrest you, I don't want to jail you. Can you please go ahead and begin to do something with the money that was given? That kind of, a mechanism is absolutely necessary. India has done that before. Quite a number of other climes have developed this kind of mechanism to say, well, we do know that you are quote-unquote too big to fail or too big to be touched, even though there is nobody that is supposed to be above the law, but we need a situation where the courageous Bola Ahmed Tinubu must implement some of these policies for the betterment of the country. If this is not done, the development of our economy may be in serious jeopardy, and future generation will still feel that it may be just right to collect any amount of money from any system, and you are ready to get away with even murder.
Shuaibu Idris, thank you for that. We'll take a break. When we're talking back, and you're still on to Good Morning Nigeria, we'll be discussing eliminating multiple exchange rates, and my guest, Dr. Emeka Okiongo, development economist, is still in the studio. Shuaibu Idris, Managing Director, Timeline Consult Limited, still here with us in the studio, and Ambassador Ayola Olukanmi. He's a career diplomat involved in economic policy. You listen to what Shuaibu Idris has said. It's not all about bringing out or dishing out policy. He has advised that Tinubu administration should have a government of national competence, and he has also said that there should be a monitoring and evaluation unit under the president to monitor the implementation of this policy. Ambassador.
Hello? Hello? I presume you're asking, that question was directed to me. And I want to say that I indeed like what my dear brother Kingsley has, the way he described it symbolically. That the president has looked into his toolbox, brought out the big hammer, bam, to take the courageous decision. What is now left is for, but you still need the nitty-gritty, the implementation of the others. Implicitly, his team of ministers who will be in charge of the economy will still need some school drivers to knot things here, maybe size 22 or size 18, to be able to make sure that everything is in place. That is key, and that is very important. And I think Dr. Meka, as well as Shuaibu, of course, has also address this issue. The question of implementation and monitoring is very important. And I'm saying this against the background of my own experience, both as a former career diplomat, as also somebody who was involved in economic development, and also a member, functioned and worked in the organized private sector. In the process of monitoring, it has been said that maybe a team will come together with the president, but there is need for constant, regular engagement with the organized private sector. I know reference has been made by Dr. That the private sector is a little bit, maybe perhaps moribund now. Maybe the private sector was maybe a little bit asleep, but I'm sure that this major event in terms of unifying the parallel and the official market will wake them up. I am saying that because I know I'm no longer Director General, but I'm still in touch with our colleagues, the manufacturer, the organized private sector, the NASIMA, Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, National Association of Small and Medium Scale Enterprises, NASI, Nigerian Association of Small and Small Scale Industry, as well as NECA. It will be very important to have a close link and monitoring, relationship with them, because they are the people at the end of the day who are there through all these members of the organized private sector. I'm sure you can reach close to about millions of SMEs, thousands of manufacturers. So there's going to be a feedback in terms of how far is it working? What are the needs to be done? Because it's not a scriptural text in which you cannot, like a scriptural text of a major religion, you cannot change it. There may be need for adjustment from time to time. And I'm saying this against the background of my own experience. And that's why I'm saying that I think it would be good to consider something similar to the QBF, the quarterly presidential briefing, maybe with a team of ministers which will come together, which will be appointed by the president himself, so that you can be able to continue to monitor regularly and when there is need for adjustment. Like I said, these are some of the things. The potentials of our country is huge. It's unimaginable. I presented my credentials when I was High Commissioner to Australia in New Zealand. And New Zealand, one of the places in New Zealand, of course, we have the University of Canterbury. And I went on to also see the place in Christchurch. And when I got to the place, I was made to understand that the headquarters of the Nigerian Montane Forest Program is in the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. The Nigerian Montane Forest is part of the Ingel-Nyeki Forest Program. 5 hours drive from Jalingo up to the place. And when I was discussing with them, the whole question of carbon credit and its potential was one of the things they are talking about. That may be a little bit far from what we are saying, but we can also connect it. This is part and parcel of it. Like I said, Western Australia makes $60 billion from iron ore deposit and export to China. Kogi State is brimming with iron ore, and all other places as far as I'm concerned is concerned. So these are the areas, these are the issues, the bigger picture, but of course, which these new policies would impact on. And finally, the subnational level. The subnational level, the respective states themselves should also be brought into this area. We talk about the federal level. What is happening at the state level in terms of the respective states themselves? So we need to bring them on board. They need to come on board. They need to also come forward with practical suggestion policies which at the state level would help to make a meaning of this one. Because at the end of the day, they will also benefit from it in terms of the forex and in terms of they're supporting their SMEs and so don't let us forget the state level. It is important that we bring them into the conversation. But lastly, like I said, I think the organized private sector, there could be a regular meeting in terms of a quarterly briefing, discussions with them in terms of how far these policies are, so that we just don't leave it at the federal level and on those in the hands of the ministers at the federal level again. This I thought, I'm sure the conversation will continue in terms of concretizing the abstractions at the end of the day and making sense of it.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador Olukone. Thank you very much. Back to the studios. Dr. Emeka Okengwu. Dr. Emeka Okengwu, in unpacking this policy of eliminating the multiple windows for forex transactions, you did talk about the need for us and therefore the authorities to look at the demand side. There are a number of sources of demand, PTA, BTA, education, health. But we can keep those ones on the side. But let's look basically at raw materials and finished goods. I've been hearing almost forever, from the manufacturers and those business, oh, we have to import our raw materials. Oh, we have to import our raw materials. Oh, we have to. It's almost as if there are no raw materials in country. So, how do we tweak that? Was the demand legitimate, or it was just a cry to encourage capital flight? And then the penchant for finished goods. How do we, I know that this is a big question because it's something that can take a full conversation. Incentivize domestic production of finished goods. I mean, we are talking about cocoa and rubber. Let's take furniture, for instance. It's the easiest thing. Businessmen will tell you that, oh, I go get my forex, whether from Zone 4 here or at Broad Street in Lagos or wherever forex is sold. Go to Turkey, is one of their favorite destinations now. Bring in my furniture, rather than investing in furniture making business in Edo State, where you have the best furniture makers in the country. So, how are we going to be addressing these issues so that if we contain the appetite, contain it, for always looking out? When we talk about yam, people will tell you there are many derivatives from yam. Are we looking into that? What do we need to start doing so that it's not just a unilateral view of things that we are taking to say, oh, we have dealt with the forex issue, so everything else will fall in place.
Thank you so much. I'll start with Ambassador's experience with Adire. The primary reason why the local Adire could have been more expensive would have been the inputs. What would these inputs be? The yarn, the dyes, and the machinery and time of turnover. That's simple. So if you had local production of yarn, local production of dyes, and mechanization of that process, where you could just turn a button and in 2-3 hours, you had about 1 ton or 2 tons rolling out. The final cost vis-a-vis your input into production would have dropped very, very drastically because of volume against value. Let me take the mining sector that he mentioned. He mentioned Kogi, but you probably have better grade iron ore in Zamfara than you have in Kogi, because the Kogi iron still has what they call the oolitic. It's oolitic iron that you need to process further, which is one of the primary reasons why it's not very suitable for Ajokuta. Story of another day. Let's talk about now how we can be able to now recreate these things, is to create ecosystems. First and foremost, you talked about the forest system. Now, to put it in proper context, with 24 million cattle in Nigeria, you'll be needing a minimum of 500,000 metric tons of forage every day. Kingsley, if you were selling 1 ton of forage for 5,000 naira, you have an ecosystem, a sub-economy that will be running out in trillions on a monthly basis by just growing and folding and baling grass for animals. And then you can be able to now have these other food values. They are fatter, you know, you can get more milk, they are healthier, you can now be able to reproduce vis-a-vis the classification. Now, you come into our food chain. Every day, sometimes you go to Spain, you're watching television, you see people dressed in white and are throwing tomatoes at each other. Okay, and by the time they finish that ceremony, they would have wasted about 1,000, 2,000 metric tons of tomato. Next time you go to Spain, go towards the Ibiza angle. Off from that Ibiza angle until you get to the seaside of Spain, what you're going to be seeing at both sides will be greenhouses, automated, churning out these vegetables in and out on a daily basis. Where you now create your local raw materials, okay, again, to mining, and I'm talking about states now that are supposed to be yearning for help. Yobe. Yobe State has 900 million, and I want to be quoted, metric tons of bentonite or bentonic clay. And bentonic clay is the raw materials for bentonite, which is a major ingredient for drilling of oil. And part of the reasons that they give why our oil drilling or oil exploration or oil production cost is because of the inputs. And what is this primary input? It is drilling, what they call drilling mud. In Plateau State, they had investigated about, I think, eight veins of barite. And what they found was out of the 2 veins that were lightly explored, 750,000 metric tons of barite, which is the second component for the production of drilling mud. So it's between bentonite and barite that you have drilling mud. Now, you go, I can keep on and on and on and on because you asked me a question about raw materials. The raw materials are everywhere, from kenef, you know, which you can use in making your yarn, to even your petrochemicals, which you can use in producing your non-woven. So like I said, a good policy that was not thought through. And that's why I'm saying that what is important for me is not even for the president, in my mind, to appoint ministers. I think it's for the president to create ecosystems. Because I don't see what the Ministry of Agriculture has constituted now. A lot of apologies to those who might not like what I'm saying, in creating food sufficiency in Nigeria. They haven't, they can't, the way it is structured. But imagine where you had an ecosystem that dealt with fisheries. And then the president has a marching order to say, I have 320 dams in Nigeria. Okay? Now, I hear that some part of, you know, these water resources or water or dam management is in the Ministry of Water Resources. Some other one is in Environment. Some other one is in Ministry of Agriculture. Now, what I want is production of 18 million metric tons of fish from our water bodies on a yearly basis. I'm not going to be talking to a minister. I'm going to be talking to an ecosystem. Now, what that will do, Kingsley, is that you don't now have the Minister of Dams or Water Resources struggling to hold on to the dams. And okay, I'll give you a typical example. Our forestry is under the Ministry of Environment. A lot of people don't know this. This is where you have all your economic trees. And then you have the Ministry of Agriculture establishing processing mills for processing cashew and other nuts. So the ministry system in Nigeria, I think for me as a last word, we might be able to look at, President should be able to take another look at the way our MDAs are structured, where you now have directors, you know, oversighting director generals. I don't see why a lot of these synergies or alignments can't be made so that you have some seamless program that now begins to support the monitoring and evaluation that, you know, Doctor had talked about. And then that engagement process, you know who it is you're talking to. Because if you are doing fishery and you go to Ministry of Agriculture and they say to you, okay, we don't have any dams, you need to go to water resources, it's going to be creating a lot of complications. So I think it's all about alignment and realignment for me.
Dr. Emeka Okengo, thank you, development economist. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Pleasure, ma'am.
A lot of issues have been raised, and I'm sure that there will be time for this discussion, to continue on in some days' time or weeks' time as it develops. Thank you so much for coming.
Pleasure.
On
It's an honor to be here.
Good Morning Nigeria. Shaibu Idris is the Managing Director, Timeline Consult. He joined us from our Kaduna studio. We appreciate your coming. And Ambassador Ayola Olukani, he is a career diplomat involved in economic diplomacy and was former Nigerian High Commissioner to Australia with concurrent accreditation to New Zealand, Fiji and Papua New Guinea. He's also former Director General, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industries, Mines and Agriculture, NACIMA. Thank you so much for your contribution to the conversation. Well, Sports Update is next.
The Super Eagles edged Sierra Leone 3-2 in Group A to qualify for next year's AFCON in Cote d'Ivoire. A brace by Victor Osimhen and a late strike by substitute Kelechi Iheanacho secured the hard-fought win in the Matchday 5 Group A tie in Monrovia, Liberia on Sunday. Osimhen opened scoring on 19 minutes before doubling the Eagles' lead on 32 minutes. Mustafa Bundu made it 2-1 in the 41st minute, while Augustus Cabo drew the Leon Stars level on 84th minute. But in the 95th minute, Iheanacho made sure of the win as it got the Eagles third. The Eagles go top in Group A on 12 points, while Guinea-Bissau in second place have also qualified. Their final game of the qualifiers is against Sao Tome and Principe in September. Meanwhile, Croatia missed out on their first international trophy and become the second nation to win the World Cup, European Championship and Nations League, following France, who beat the Spanish team in the 2021 Nations League final.
All right, let's go down to the forest scene for some stories.
Polling stations closed in Bamako, Mali at 6 p.m. yesterday to begin vote tally. During the day, citizens had voted on the new constitution. The main changes in the new draft constitution include strengthening the president's powers, reforming institutions, or recognizing traditional authorities. Authorities say they were content with the voting process. Some 8.4 million citizens were eligible to vote in the referendum. The danger of jihadist attacks was a consideration in central and northern regions, meaning the vote was not held in some parts of the country, including the town of Kidal, a stronghold of former rebels. A team of observers from civil society groups backed by the European Union reported that there were only a small number of voting issues in the polling stations to which they were deployed. Normal life has partially returned to the streets of the greater capital area of Sudan after the Sudanese armed forces and the rival Rapid Support Forces agreed to a new 72-hour ceasefire. The ceasefire took effect yesterday, according to a joint statement issued by Saudi Arabia and the United States. In the hours before the truce period began, fighting was still going fiercely in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, and the greater capital area of Sudan, comprising Khartoum, Durham, and Khartoum North, as well as North Kordofan and Darfur. With the start of the truce period on Sunday, many residents showed up on streets to buy daily necessities, while others were leaving Khartoum for stable surrounding areas.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of the program. I am Jummai Yusuf.
Look after yourselves. I'm Kingsley.